Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of the Android Developer Office Hours. My name is Redo Meyer. I'm going to be doing my best impression of Joe Mallon this afternoon. And I'm joined by some colleagues which will hopefully be able to answer some questions. We've got Joe, Trevor, and Alex over on the couch. So yeah, thanks for joining us. We will be going through the Google moderator queue, which we've shared out with everyone. If you've got other questions, then please add it to the queue or add it to the stream, or even better, join us on the Hangout Live, and we'll try and take as many live questions as we can. It's always the most fun way if we get to interact with you guys and find out a little bit more about the questions that you've got. So we'll kick off with one of the moderator questions to get started. D, from somewhere undefined, wants to know, how do multi-pane tablet apps like Gmail, Calendar, Talk achieve the right pane connected to the left pane pointed triangle effect?
Alex. I guess I'll take this one. Actually, when this question was asked, I thought the answer would be a lot more complicated than it was. I thought there was some sort of style or something.
Actually, hold up a sec. I think somebody's talking over on top of us. Actually, hold up a sec. I think somebody's...
I think we've got some feedback.
Oh, no, we just got a little bit of echo.
There we go.
Okay.
All right, just a reminder for those of you who are joining us live, please be sure to mute your mic when you're not talking. We do record these, and we want to try and keep the audio nice and clear for everyone who's watching after the fact.
Right.
And for live, for that matter.
To answer the question, it's actually really easy. All you have to do is, or the way that Gmail and Calendar and Talk do it, is all they really do is set a white left-pointing triangle at the far right of the selected list view item. And because the list view items run right up against the edge of the divider between panes, it looks like the divider has a little notch in it. But all they're doing is changing the view when it is the selected view.
Cool.
Perfect.
Simple enough.
Excellent. All right. Let's see. Next question. Do you plan to add full backup of device feature to Android? Backup API exists, but even Google doesn't use it. SMS call logs, settings, played games, etc. They all disappear after resetting the device or after changing the phone. So as with anything which involves the word plan, that's usually a pretty good indication that it's not something that we can talk about. So yeah, I can't comment on whether or not that sort of feature is or isn't in the roadmap. What I can say is that it's definitely a good indication, like your question says, that more developers should be doing this. So definitely it's best practice to try and back up as much as you can. I think one of the key things there around SMS and call logs is that there's a privacy issue with that, and so you want to be really cautious about transferring people's private data anywhere off the phone without their explicit permission.
Yep. Now that said, there actually is a feature that is already on the device. It was added in Ice Cream Sandwich. So there is a full device backup over ADB feature. This is intended more for development purposes, which is why the options for it are hidden inside of the developer options menu in settings. But if you really do want to back your phone up, I believe the command is ADB backup, and it will go and dump all of the user data to a file over USB. And then if you go into the developer options menu, you can go and set an encryption key to make sure that if somebody does go and, say you plug your phone into a charging station or something like that, and it tries to go and grab a backup, the data that comes off of the phone will be in a encrypted format, so nobody can go and try and grab your data that way. The UI for this is definitely not something that we want most users to run into because it does require running ADB, but there is some functionality there. And if you're really adventurous, you could even go and write an app that uses the ADB protocol to go and write a backup utility for users. It's not something we provide right now, but there's no reason a third party couldn't write it.
I would also say in the case of backing up third-party apps like games, one of the reasons we don't do that ourselves, that we really encourage the app and the game developers to implement their own backup, because if we just blindly copied a database up to the cloud and then back down to a new device, we have, for instance, if we move it from a gingerbread to a froyo device or an ice cream sandwich to a gingerbread device, we might be breaking some sort of compatibility if they have features or if they have elements in their data that are relevant to a new platform version that aren't to an old platform version.
Well, and there are the privacy issues that Redo mentioned as well.
Right, there are the privacy issues where we can't just go yanking data from the phone and copying willy-nilly to anything that a user installs their account on.
Yeah, but I think that the experience we want users to see is this this cloud experience where all your data is automatically backed up. I think anytime a user has to go and manually connect their phone to their computer and run a backup command, quite frankly, it's something that's not going to happen. So no data is going to get backed up there. But if, as an app developer, you go and implement the backup API, things happen transparently, things just work. The user's data is safe. It's placed on a a server somewhere that's not going to go and get melted when somebody's house catches fire. Right? It's a really good user experience, and it's the one we want to encourage.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's see. Mark, I see that you've joined us online. Did you have a question that you would like to ask us in person?
Yeah, sure. So I'm trying to set the notification visibility on the download manager, and I'd like to set it to, hang on one sec, visibility visible notify completed, and this is targeted at level 11, so honeycomb, and it keeps throwing a security exception with the error invalid value for visibility 1. If I do not set the visibility, works great. The minute I try to set it to notify when finished, it basically blows up with a security exception. I think it's a bug, but...
Yeah, that's sort of my impression looking through this as well, too. That's the same type of error you get if you set something like, visibility hidden, and you don't request the permission to do that. It is a slightly different error, right? It has a different ID, but it's still a security exception in both cases. So I strongly suspect here that we have a bug in our code where we've locked down one of these visibility values when we shouldn't have. We're going to go ahead and dig into the code a bit more and try and verify if that's actually the case, and we'll post an update in your Stack Overflow thread. But yeah, I definitely agree. This sounds a lot like a bug on our side.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've started to have a look into it. I know that you pinged us on Google Plus as well. We had a couple of people have a quick look, and everything you're doing seems right, and what you've diagnosed seems to be the most likely solution. So we're going to, like Trevor says, we're going to dig into the code and see if it is an issue and if it's been rectified in later releases and exactly what it is. And yeah, we'll definitely get back to you on the Stack Overflow question.
Okay, great, thanks.
Perfect. As it happens, that was the next question on our moderator queue, so we can skip that one and move on to the next.
Perfect timing.
Very good timing. Yes, thanks, Mike. So Alexandra L. from Brazil would like to know how to correctly detect connection changes or drops with type of connection, because there are lots of snippets, but what is the right way? So what is the right way to correctly detect connectivity changes? Okay, so
there's a blanking on the name all of a sudden, but there is a broadcast intent that's sent whenever your connectivity changes. If anybody remembers the name of it off the top of their head, let me know. Or we could look it up. But yeah, so basically you're just going to go and set up a broadcast receiver that goes and watches for that intent. And when you receive it, that's your notification that something's changed. That said, this broadcast intent is sent for a lot of different scenarios. So I think it's even sent when you change cell towers. There's a lot of variables that can cause it to get sent. So you need to be very careful and look inside of this, the intent, and take a look at the network type. And on top of that, when you don't actually care whether or not the network's changing, modify your broadcast receiver so it's not actually listening. So turn it on when you actually have something that's connection sensitive, and then turn it back off afterwards because it does have a bit of overhead. Robert is telling me here that it's connectivity manager.connectivity action. Actually, I think that's coming from Roman. Roman via Robert via our TV screen here in the studio. So yeah, just go ahead and monitor for that. That'll tell you when something does change, and like I said, just be sure to turn it off when you don't actually care.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is there's an Android training class, Optimizing Battery Life, at developer.android.com/training, which has a lesson determining and monitoring the connectivity status. So that should have some of the best practice code snippets to listen for connectivity changes and react accordingly. Perfect. Okay. Let's see. We do have another person who joined us online. Unfortunately, I cannot read what I think is Arabic, so I can't.
I think that's Hebrew, actually.
Hebrew? Okay, my apologies. But but...
Yeah, that's Hebrew.
It's Hebrew.
Hebrew. Okay, perfect. So do you have a question?
Yeah, that's Hebrew.
Perfect. So, Hebrew. Okay, perfect. So do you have a question you'd like to ask?
Yes, I've got a question. I'm trying to to use the built-in component of a picker, but to use custom values, and I couldn't find a way to exactly do that. I'm a bit new to this, so I'm asking how can I do it.
I'm not sure I fully understand the question.
Yeah, so our audio here actually is not so great, so if you want to ask that one more time, sorry about that.
I want to use the built-in picker with custom values.
I see. So you want to be able to do the same thing as if you try and pick a contact from the contact manager or an image from the gallery, but you want to do that with your own values, is that right?
Yes, for example, when you have a number picker, but instead of having numbers, to have like strings, different strings to pick from.
Got you. Okay, so there's a couple of ways to do that. If what you want is a picker similar to like a date picker or a time picker, then you can do that using your own spinner. I think spinner is the name of the control. So you would build your own spinner, and you would have probably an array adapter or a content provider. Simple cursor adapter, depending on...
We have Roman here. I think he has something to say about this.
I think Roman may have an opinion about this one.
He has the look on his face. He knows something.
Stand back.
This is me off screen. So the question was how to display custom values in a number picker, right?
Yeah.
Basically, number picker has this thing called get displayed values. It's not great in the sense that you can't just throw an adapter at it, but basically you have to treat all of your values, I believe, as integers. And then just return the correct string array for the displayed values. I believe that's how it does things like showing January through December in the date component or the date widget, whatever it's called. And basically that's how you do it, I believe.
That makes sense. Excellent. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that answers my question. I just wanted to also tell you that if you try to connect to the Hangout using a cell phone, it doesn't work at all.
Yes, unfortunately we are aware of that. So Hangouts, particularly Hangouts in Air, are still very much in beta, so we're hoping that, or expecting I should say, that a lot of those sorts of things are going to improve. So we hope that people will be able to join the Hangouts on their mobile devices. As you can imagine, those of us here in the Android team are particularly keen on seeing those sorts of innovations. So yeah, hopefully we'll see that sort of thing come along.
Okay, thank you.
Cheers.
And thanks to Roman as well for stopping in. Always a source of wisdom.
Indeed, the guru from next door. Always valuable. Okay, next question is from Cicine, who asks, the photo gallery on Ice Cream Sandwich shows a highlight when you fling a zoomed-in image and then hit either the left or right edge. Any tips on how one would implement such a highlight or animation? It seems similar to the scroll highlight in list views.
Yes.
I think it actually is the exact same highlight as in list views. I'm not really a graphics programmer, so I don't know how to go about implementing that effect. I would just go dig into the Android source and rip it straight out of list view.
Yeah, specifically you're going to want to look for, we call it overscroll. So just look through the list view source code, search for overscroll, and you'll find the code that's responsible for drawing that. That's probably the best way to do it, because I imagine actually figuring out what the correct way to actually go and get that bloom effect that happens involves a fair amount of math, and copying the math that we've already done is probably the easiest way to do it.
Do you guys know, is it specific to list view, do you think, or is there a container control like a scroll view or something like that which may implement it already? I have no idea.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was a scroll view or a container like you're describing, but you would at least be able to find it from list view. More
wisdom from Roman. He says take a look for edge effect compat in the support library.
We love the support library.
We put that in? That's awesome. I didn't know that was in the support library.
Now you do.
Our support library's actually gotten to the size where I'm not aware of everything that's in it anymore.
Can only be a good thing.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Cool. Well, there you go. So edge effect compat in the support library is the way to add the overscroll image animation.
Business, yes.
Yeah. Very nice.
Excellent.
Thank you once again, Roman. Next week we should just get you to sit in here.
or we should just invite him and have him like in one of the little windows down there.
That could work. That could work. Feel free to dial in if if you would prefer.
Yeah, so if you don't want to walk one door over.
That's right. It is a long way.
Right.
Like
It
it's
is
an
a
entire
long
door. You have to open like one door. Yeah. Get out
Maybe
of the
two.
Well, true, but I don't think he's got his office door closed.
Right.
Kenny Dude from Northeasty asks, can we see a Google moderator for Google Play feature requests? That is a good question, probably one better targeted at the Google Play team. So I will get in touch with them and see if they have any kind of forum for taking sort of user requests and those sorts of things. I do believe they have a Google Plus page. They do, Google Play page. So if all else fails, that's generally a pretty good way to let teams know what it is that you want from them, is to reach out to them on Google+. I know that we have, like all the teams who run these pages take them really seriously. We really want to engage with users. Any kind of feature requests, generally you're not going to get a lot of feedback. At most they'll go, yes, we have heard what you have to say. But they have. It's not just a brush off. I think a lot of the teams really value that feedback, even if they can't say much about it beyond thank you for your feedback. So yeah, that would be my suggestion.
Yeah. And we also have held hangouts with members of the Google Play team as well. So I don't know if or when the next time we hold one of these with them will be, but I think that, there's always a chance we could do another one. So be sure to keep an eye on our Plus page, and we'll post announcements there, just like we do for this event. And who knows, there might be another chance to go and ask them a question live.
Absolutely. And Trevor's response has actually prompted me to remember that there are possibly more than one way to take that question. So I assumed that you meant Google Play as in the broader store. If you're referring specifically to the developer console, then yeah, we do hangouts with them quite regularly, and we'll hopefully be doing another one in not too distant the future. Let's see. Chinaski from Spain asks, is there a way to create 9 patch drawables programmatically with source, not compiled, bitmaps downloaded from the web?
Yes, absolutely. If you take a look at the 9-patch class, the one and only constructor for that class does exactly what you want to do here. So there's three options you pass in. You pass in your bitmap data. You pass in a byte array, which goes and defines what the boundaries are for your 9-patch slices, and then there's a third parameter for a name, which could be null if you don't really want to name it, and that'll give you your 9-patch object, which you can then go and do fun things with, like display on screen. Pretty straightforward.
I'd actually be kind of curious what the intended use of this is. Like the two that spring immediately to mind are sort of the funhouse effects for photographs where you can stretch and squish people, or just the ability to skin your apps. But if the person who asked is on, I'd be curious what you're actually doing with that feature.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the most common use case is just around creating scalable assets effectively. But
right.
Runtime 9 patches, yeah, it's definitely an interesting concept.
I'm glad to know it's possible now that the question's been asked, but it had not occurred to me before today to ask the question.
It's always some of our most fun ones, like the questions we read and go, why would you want to do that? Let's see, Ran from Israel asks, is there a way to update a compound drawable, text view, drawable top, etc., on an app widget layout using remote views? Android Lint keeps suggesting that you do it, but he couldn't find a way to update compound drawables with remote views.
So we asked Roman about this actually before the show, and his answer was that you could not do it because I'm trying to remember. It was because the compound drawables are not.
No, because the remote view.
Remote views.
The method call to modify the compound drawable isn't remotable.
That's
so you're not able to call it from the remote view.
Yeah. So basically, Android Lint is wrong.
There is, however, in the specific case of text view, there is a remote view.set text view text if that's what you're trying to update.
Yes, that's very true. Yeah. It's not a remotable view method, says Roman. Yeah, so what that just translates to is that there is no way to call that method on using a remote view, effectively. So you're out of luck there.
But I'll pass that along to the guys on the Lint team so that they don't keep suggesting to do that since they can't do it.
Exactly, and the good news is that Lint rules are very easy for the team to update, and they quite frequently do updates there. So these sorts of feedback on things which Lint is telling you which isn't actually possible or sensible, that's useful feedback. We can send that back and try and make Lint more and more useful. Let's see. Great King from Ohio asks, in Honeycomb and later, is there an API for writing to the external storage SD card? On many devices, the Zoom and some Samsung devices, the SD card is now an MTP device for read-write from a USB connection. Apps on the device only have read-only access.
Alex, do you want to answer this one?
The person asking sort of answers their own question, but just to reiterate and emphasize it, this is actually by design. I believe it's a device-specific situation where some devices will let you read from SD card and some won't. The important thing to remember is that there's a difference between external storage and shared storage. And if you want to write to an area where other apps can access, or you can access via USB, what you really want to write to is shared storage. According to our compatibility definition document, all devices that match this that come with Android Market will have at least 2 gigs of shared storage. So there's actually room for you to write this stuff. It's just that there's no guarantee that it's going to be in the form of an SD card. Strangely, and it almost feels like just for the sake of being confusing, you can access that shared storage /SD card.
Right.
But it's really for backwards compatibility, yeah.
Yeah, there's no guarantee /SD card is a SD card. But all of the original devices we shipped used an SD card for shared storage. And then somewhere along the line, people said, hey, we can actually just include a giant block of memory inside the device's shared storage rather than including an SD card. Yeah. Again, some devices do use an SD card, some don't. The best option is just go and use the API calls. They'll give you the correct directory. But keep in mind, just because the device has an SD card reader does not mean that the SD card is necessarily your shared storage. And in the case of the Zoom, that is definitely true. We include a very large internal memory for that device. So we expect app developers will use that as the primary storage location for their data.
It's actually it's an interesting side effect. So the /SD card way of accessing this SD card was never actually documented. It was a private API call, which is a good example of why you shouldn't use them, because it can get confusing. So I think the call is get external storage, and that will return the appropriate file path to wherever the shared storage is.
So not only is SD card not necessarily an SD card, but get external storage is might not be external storage.
Right. So it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Don't know why you get confused about that. Anyway, moving on.
Moving on. Is there an easy way to sync app data between devices? We would like users to be able to continue where they left off in a game between multiple devices. This is a great thing. I love the idea of being able to pick up my phone, drop it, pick up my tablet, and be at the same place in the same game.
I would really like that feature in Angry Birds, actually.
I think so, yeah.
Terribly annoying.
Yeah, or at the very least, they should use the backup API.
At the very
I think
least.
they should.
Yeah, maybe both.
Yeah, because especially here, we tend to wipe our devices pretty frequently because we have the latest builds that we're testing. And every now and then, we wind up having a build that causes us to have to wipe our device, such is the nature of testing. And invariably, the feedback is, I'm so sad I lost all my Angry Birds progress. Which is probably one of the motivating factors behind that AD backup command is that people wouldn't lose their Angry Birds progress.
Possibly was the P0 on that one.
Angry Birds is the one that drives me nuts. Just because I can get 3 stars on a level once doesn't mean it's going to take me less than 2 hours to do it again.
Exactly. Fluke! Never looking at it again.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Just take your stars and move quietly along.
So let's see if we can help Nick. He said that he couldn't find any examples besides syncing contacts or email. So do we have a best practice or some guidance on what is the right way to sync app data like game levels between devices?
Well, we have a practice in that we have an Eclipse plugin called the Google plugin for Eclipse that actually has a sort of template project for creating an Android app and an App Engine app that can talk to each other. And what happens is the Android app sends data to the Android app sends data to the App Engine app using standard HTTP calls, and the App Engine app can send push notifications back down to the Android application using C2DM. And so if you pop that open, it'll give you a great skeleton app so you can figure out all the elements for having these two send data back and forth.
Right, and it gives you a pretty nice user experience too, because Your Android app already has, most likely, your Google account registered on the phone. App Engine has access to the Google login service and can go and verify app credentials for you. And there is a way to go and request a token for App Engine specifically on the device. And as a result, this whole thing just sort of works. You get a pop-up dialog once saying, can we access your account? You say yes. Behind the scenes, it gets your login credentials, passes those up to App Engine, which then verifies them with Google, which then grants you access to, verifies your identity within the app. You can then go and store all your game data into your database associated with the user, and then use C2DM to pass it back down to the device. And if you use the plugin in Eclipse, all of this happens pretty much automatically. The only thing left for you is to actually write that logic to go and save your game data.
Right. I would say the plugin makes it super easy to use App Engine, but you can really back into it with any server you want. The real key is that when you make progress in the game on one of your devices, that you somehow phone home to a central server that would then send a push notification to other devices registered with your account that have that game installed, and then they would know to log in and download the updated progress.
Right. Now, the examples for syncing contacts or emails should actually still work in this case. I mean, it's the same idea, right? You have some sort of content provider, and you write a sync adapter, which then goes and in the background takes whatever's in your sync adapter and sends it to some sort of third-party server. It's the exact same idea, except instead of an email, it's just game data. Now, the alternative is to go and do all this inside of your app, but what sync adapter does is it makes all this run in the background. So when you launch your app for the first time, since you have this background sync process, there's no, oh, wait, please wait till we fetch new game data, right? It's just all there waiting for you, and your phone syncs it in the background. I will caution you, though, if you do this, be very, very attentive to how you're using the device, and specifically how what you do affects battery life. Games, in the broad scheme of things, are not that important. Your game shouldn't be drawing any battery life at all when it's not actually running. So
that's interesting. So,
and then this is a case where C2DM would actually be very useful, right? Send that ping when you actually have game data you want to save.
Yeah, it seems like
or restore rather.
For something like a game, you don't. Like a sync adapter almost feels like it might be a little heavyweight, right? Because the game doesn't need to know what level it's up to until you're actually trying to play the game, right? So it's effectively...
Well, it's true, but you could be on an airplane, and you might not have connectivity.
That's very true. That's very true. In that case, yeah, C2DM seems like it would be a great solution, because then every time you finish a level, it just updates it to the server and pings it out to your other devices.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I like that. Cool. And the advantage of that, as soon as you're starting to sync sort of game progress and things on a central server, you're already part of the way there to creating a solution where you may want to be able to add some social interaction to your game as well, and share that data amongst your friends, and keep track of who's getting further than everyone else. So.
Yeah. And yeah, this actually brings up another thing worth mentioning, and this seems to come up every few weeks, and it's worth mentioning again for those of you who have not been joining us every week. We like to remind people that even though you are on a wireless device and you have this wonderful cell network that usually has connectivity, you don't always have connectivity. And a lot of times people do want to do stuff even though they don't have a network connection. A lot of times they want to play games, especially on an airplane, on the train, etc. So fetching game data is one thing, but this also applies to other things like licensing requests, right? Make sure your app doesn't depend on having a network connection every time it runs.
Yeah, I can speak from experience. When I took a long holiday back to Australia late last year, and I downloaded all the games that I wanted and all the moves and everything, so I was set for this 24-hour flight from hell with all of my stuff. And I tell you, when I opened up a game and it was like, oh, sorry, you failed the licensing check because you're on an airplane, I was not pleased with the developers and had some frank and honest feedback, which I was more than willing to share. So, and I know Billy, one of the other guys in our team, had a similar experience with movies where he downloaded the content and it was all verified, and he gets on the plane and it says, oh, I'm sorry, we can't verify this content because you're not online. So yeah, I think it's really important to remember, particularly like even taking planes out of the equation had similar issues when I lived back in London, where you would be on the underground, and to suggest that your internet connectivity was spotty is pretty generous. So you really want to take into account this use case where people will be online for a while, but not constantly and not well,
Yep.
so that it should still work. One way or the other, you should still be able to use the games, use the apps, even if you don't have a permanent connection.
Right. I guess there's two sides to the fact that you have a mobile device. One is, yes, you do get internet connection when you're outside of your house and away from Wi-Fi, but you're also using the device in a lot more places too, where there might be nothing.
I mean, that's the irony, right? Is that a lot of the time is when I pull my phone out is when I don't have internet connectivity. You know, I can't check my email because that hasn't been updated, and I can't check Google Reader because I don't have an internet connection. So I'm looking on my phone for other things to pass the time.
Gmail will cache. Actually, I think even the built-in email caches too, right?
It does,
yeah.
it does, but the London Underground has such frequent and long-lived stoppages that you can run out of the cache. It's like I can't read any more email, god damn it. So, yeah, so having, which is not a good sign when that happens on any level. But yeah, I mean, that's exactly when you want to be able to open your news app and be able to basically read an entire paper's worth of news while you're stuck on the train without internet connectivity, because then you don't necessarily need to have the latest updates, but you just need to have a bunch of content. So yeah, be one of those apps, the ones people turn to when nothing else is working. They can still play your game or read your content.
That's right. So the thought for the day, cache early, cache often for your internet connection connectivity.
Absolutely. Let's see, we've got a couple of people who've joined us. Michael, in particular, I think has been trying to get on for a while. Please, ask us your question.
I recently encrypted my Galaxy Nexus about a week ago, and I used it for like a week. I haven't changed anything, but one day I tried to decrypt it, and it wasn't even an option. So is there like a easy way to decrypt this as far as encrypting it too?
Unfortunately not. The only way to decrypt a device, I mean, of course you can turn it on and it'll decrypt it temporarily at runtime. But if you want to permanently decrypt the device, unfortunately the only way to do that right now is to do a factory reset.
But you're going to take down all your data and everything else with it.
Right now,
that's a security feature, although you might not consider it a feature yourself.
Yeah, now I will add, there was the conversation we mentioned earlier. There is that ADB backup command. And if you run that, you can use that to go and back up all of your data and then restore it after you go and wipe your device.
So that'll back it up decrypted?
Yes. Nice. Well, it'll encrypt it, but it uses a different encryption key. It's the encryption key you set in the settings menu for backup specifically. Gotcha. So, of course, you do have to start the device up and decrypt it first, and you have to turn on ADB. So there are several safeguards to make sure that your encrypted data stays encrypted when you don't want to do this, right? But there are ways to go and get your data off the device. But in the end, there is that factory reset step you need to do if you want to decrypt. I think we actually do warn about that as part of the encryption process.
Yeah,
but
it should warn you.
Yeah,
just be aware.
Yeah, it's something you only see once, so stuff like that is easy to overlook. But
yeah, I'm curious. Is there a particular reason why you want to decrypt the device?
Well, like I said, I'm rooted. So like, if I wanted to change the ROM, in order to change the ROM, it has to mount the SD card. And since it's encrypted, it can't mount the SD card, so you can't really do anything.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, I think what Trevor was saying is probably your best bet then. Just use. I mean, if you're installing custom ROMs, then you know how ADB works. So yeah, I'd say pull off all of the data and then do the reset and then push it all back on. The backup stuff on the same device works really, really well.
Even a simpler way than that, what I had to do, I had copied the SD card completely and just did a factory reset that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, copying the SD card won't get you everything though. It won't get you your app data.
Well, I used Titanium backup, so I kept my app data too.
Well, I mean, there are some things that are not stored on the SD card. There's a lot of stuff, but not everything. And that's where that ADB backup command helps you, is it actually stores pretty much all of the user data for the entire device.
Yeah, things like user settings in apps in particular is a good example. That'll get stored in the sandbox where the device, where the app is installed. So, but depending on what you want, if you just want to make sure you don't lose your pictures and your music and those sorts of things, then yeah, the SD card will do the job.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries, man. Okay, perfect. I think we're back to moderator. Let's have a look. Android app permissions are shown during install. If I have a certain functionality that is not part of the core of my app that requires to read contact info, for example, can I delay that permission and request it to pop up only when the user needs it? So this is the idea of rather than showing the permissions up front, to ask for them on demand, like when someone wants to use a particular feature of your app. So anyone have an answer they'd like to share on that?
Unfortunately, the answer is no. There's not a good way to do it. There is one workaround which you could use. It's not the best user experience, but that's, I believe you mentioned contacts, for example, was the example you gave. We do have a contacts REST API. And so if the user is using Google Contacts, and you have no guarantee that they are, but if they are using Google Contacts, you can go and access contacts directly over HTTP. And that would be a runtime authorization request. And so that is the one exception there. But again, it's not really a good user experience because you have no guarantee that the contacts the user is using is actually coming from Google and not some other app installed on the system.
So as you say that, I have something tickling the back of my mind, which I think Diane shared a couple of weeks back. Diane Hackborn, one of the framework engineers, who's always a fount of wisdom. Suggesting that for picking contacts in particular, there was a way to do it that didn't require you have read contacts permission. So I think if you use the action pick contacts, you can bundle a permission. So you basically, all you're requesting is permission to receive one lot of contact information that the user is explicitly choosing.
Right. Yeah. So the pick. You still do need to request this permission when you first display your app. But it is not as scary a permission as read all contacts. It's just display the contact picker. And then again, like Rado said, you actually have this gating action where the user doesn't see, or sorry, your app doesn't see the whole contact database. It just sees one. One contact that the user has selected that they want to share with the app. So it's much safer.
Yeah. So hopefully that's useful. I think more generally, the reason why we do it this way. So I remember back, my last smartphone I had before I had an Android phone was a Sony P910i. I love that phone. And the way it worked for permissions was it would ask you explicitly every time you wanted to do something which could involve some sort of privacy or security risk. It would ask you, are you sure you want to let this app access the internet? Check your contacts. And so every time you wanted to do something like read your Gmail, you would get 15 different pop-ups come up saying, are you sure? Are you sure? Really? Are you sure? It would drive me crazy. And so the idea here is, in terms of user experience, is that you put all that stuff up front. You explain what the app can use, and then it's up to you to decide, is what it's asking for reasonable? Now, I know that can have sort of that side effect of having apps where you're like, well, I'm a user and I don't understand why this photo app wants to read contact information. Like, what does that have to do with anything? And so that's a challenge, certainly, in terms of educating your users and making it clear what the functionality is and why it might require those different permissions. So yeah, we definitely understand the frustration there, but I think the user experience in presenting those permissions up front is still an improvement over asking them each time, or even if it's once on demand. I think that really interrupts the flow. It's probably a worse approach. But yeah, user education is the tricky part. Let's have a look. Another question from Pramod in India. He asks, how can I change the keyboard language programmatically? Anyone know the answer to that? Is that something you can do?
I'm going to take a stab at this and say I don't think this is possible.
Because I know, at least when you swap keyboards, like most apps I've seen they'll take you to the settings page where you can swap the keyboard, but they can't actually do that themselves.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to say. Is like even keyboard applications won't give you a button that says make this the default keyboard. I think it's just one of those things that's built into the framework, or more accurately excluded from the API, in order to prevent one app from going nuts and sort of ruining the phone experience for like the rest of the phone outside your own application. Just because a malicious app could just randomly change the language on your keyboard and you wouldn't know it was that app.
That would be fun.
Yeah, that'd be kind of crazy.
Well, as you can see, I can't even tell the difference between Arabic and Hebrew, so it could be a real problem for me.
Right.
The random keyboard app, or the random language of the day app, or something like that. That would be
a really aggressive way to teach you a foreign language.
Exactly.
It's like, today you're learning French. Seriously.
Yeah, and you no longer have a choice in that. Seriously, the best you can do is fire an intent that takes the user to the settings page where they would then select the language.
Right, so there is an intent that you can fire that will take you straight to the settings page?
Straight to the settings page, yeah. That's what the, like Trevor was saying, that's what the keyboard apps use to take you to where you would select that keyboard as the default keyboard.
Perfect. And that's just the same way that you do things like turning on or off GPS in your app, is you send them to the settings page to turn that on. So, yeah, that makes sense. All right, let's have a look. What else have we got? Sanjeev from California asks, is it possible to reuse a fragment instance in multiple fragments? This is in the case where the same fragment is being shown in multiple fragments. That seems almost a little bit too Inception-y, fragments within fractions.
You need to go deeper.
Yeah. Eliminating duplicate calls in UI building. So he wants to reuse fragment instances in multiple places. Can such a thing be done?
Sort of.
I like it. It's definitive.
Yes. So you can create multiple instances of fragments, possibly from the same source, but you can't reuse that same instance multiple times within the same UI at the same time. Because fragment instance can only have one parent. So trying to actually take the same instance, render it multiple times as the same exact instance can't work. But like I said, just go ahead and create multiple instances of that fragment. So I believe there's like inflate from XML. I can't remember the exact call off the top of my head. But if you do define your fragment in XML, you can certainly do it that way. Actually, wait, no, I take it back. There's a fragment class. What am I thinking? What am I thinking here?
Fragment,
yeah, just take your fragment and call new, and you get a new instance, and then just make multiple instances, and you can go and display those, however you like. You can, nest them, put them side by side, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually a really good use case. I mean, that's one of the beauties of fragments, is that they're entirely reusable, fully encapsulated application components. So you can just create something which looks a certain way and then have it in as many different places within your app as possible. But it doesn't really make sense to have the same instance of a fragment in more than one place, because then you would sort of expect the UI to update. So if you change something here, it's going to go off and automatically change it at runtime somewhere else. Just kind of an interesting effect, but probably not what you're actually aiming for. So yeah, just create multiple instances. Let's see, we've had a couple of people join us on the live stream. Alexander, do you have a question that you would like to ask?
Yes, I'm having problems with the fragment page, the fragment pager, and because I'm trying to use the v4 compatibility, that way it's compatible with everything from basically 2.1 on. And I have the theme tester app that I'm trying to implement that in. And the problem is I can make the layouts show up and I can swipe in between. But I can't enable button clicks. Like I can't add button click handlers. It'll just force close the app whenever I try to press the button, or it'll just force close when it starts. And the logcat says something about the onCreate failing, and I don't know what the problem is.
Okay, so this is problems with button handlers within fragments embedded within a view pager?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see, have either of you guys played much around with the view pager and fragments and stuff within it?
I have not done very much with view pager yet, no.
Not really, a little bit, but I haven't encountered anything like that. Do you remember which onCreate was throwing the exception in force closing? Was it the fragments onCreate or the activities onCreate?
I'm not sure. I could find out real quick.
So one thing which that prompts me to think of, like it is important within your fragments, you need to create an empty constructor, because if the system is going to try and create your fragments, this is particularly the case if you're doing screen rotations, it destroys it all and recreates it all for you, and it uses reflection, and so it uses the empty constructor. So if your fragment doesn't have an empty constructor, that could be the problem. It's trying to call something which hasn't been defined.
Okay, because I pretty much took your examples like from the developer website and like copy and pasted that onto like a blank thing, and then I filled in all the stuff that I had. So here, I'll run it on my phone real quick.
One possibility that just occurred to me, are you adding buttons? Are the buttons being added in the XML layout, or are they being added in the on fragment created? Or because the reason I ask is because at the end of the fragments on create, the root view isn't necessarily fully instantiated. For most of your UI layout stuff, you need to actually move that over to on view created.
Well,
I think it's on
that's
view
true.
created.
Yeah, if you're trying to bind things to your button handlers within onCreate with the fragment, that won't work because when onCreate's being called, as Alex says, the actual views haven't been inflated.
Yeah.
It hasn't been attached to the parent activity. Basically, there's nothing there to attach to yet, so you'll get null return
that makes sense.
find view by ID.
That would be an insta crash, which is
Yeah.
what you're experiencing. So that might be a good place to look too.
Yeah, so you want that stuff, as Alex said, you want that in your on view created handler of the fragment. That's the right place to start pulling out views and assigning click handles and that sort of stuff to them.
Okay, because the main activity is a fragment activity, and then the first thing it does is set content view main, like it kind of acts like a regular activity, and then I set up the tabs, add tabs, and it does the view pager, and of course down here it has all the classes for it. And then each fragment is its own, like I have each fragment as its own file, or as its own class, like separate, so that I can see everything separate. And I tried to use the buttons inside each fragment, like when I go to add functionality for the buttons, because I have a button that also calls up a toast message or one that sends like a notification to the notification bar. And would I implement that in each fragment individually or from the main layout?
Well, that's actually a fair question. It's really up to you as to how encapsulated you want the behavior to be. So if it's supposed to be a fragment that's quite generic in that I have a fragment and it displays something and it has a button, and like all of your fragments look the same, but the actions based on those buttons is different, then you'd probably be better off building one fragment which just calls a handler, which then the activity can hook up to behave in the right way. So you're just passing back I've clicked this button in this fragment, and the activity says, oh, that's my notification fragment, so fire off a notification. If it's tightly bound, so if it's a case of, well, this fragment is designed to display something, let you choose something, and then when you hit this button, it will always display a toast, then you probably want to encapsulate it there.
Okay. And the thing is, I kind of have it, have the layout kind of weird, like I have each tab, because I'm doing the view pager, but it's also listed or shows up as tabs. And I have each tab layout, and then I use the tab layout nested inside of another layout that I use to reference the fragment, because I want them all inside scroll views, so that whenever I add content to the main one, it'll just automatically make it to where I can scroll through it. Because the first one, the first tab, it can already scroll because there's so much content that it needs to scroll. The second one, there isn't enough stuff there yet, but whenever I plan to add stuff, I want it to be ready to scroll. And I don't know if the whole nesting it inside of another one is causing problems or not. I don't think it should, since I used the include, so.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it should be causing a problem specifically. That layout is starting to sound a little complicated in terms of sort of the UI. It's hard to say without sort of seeing it, but tabs within view pages, within scroll views, all starts to get a little bit hairy. If nothing else, just from a performance perspective, you've got a lot of moving pieces, all of which are going to be drawing on top of each other and trying to handle scrolling. You want to be cautious of that, but it doesn't sound like it should be causing any problems.
Okay. Oh, and another quick question. I have another app that's going to try to do the same thing, where it's loading a web view, and I want to build a swipe in between the web views on the tabs. And how would I implement the web view? Because I tried to do it inside the fragment and it force closed. Is it because the same on create that was causing this one to mess up as well?
It's likely. Basically, your fragment on create shouldn't do anything because nothing is ready to happen there. So the only thing you can really do is create, initialize variables which you'll use later on, but nothing which is touching the UI should happen in onCreate. It should all happen on or after on attach or on view created, depending on exactly what it is.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll try that out. How much longer is the Hangout going to last?
We're only going to be online for probably another 10 or 15 minutes, but you can ping us on the Android Developers Plus page, and we'll definitely follow up with you.
All right, thanks.
Or if you've got something specific, put it on Stack Overflow and put a comment on the page as well, and we can follow up that way.
Yeah, definitely. We love Stack Overflow. It's a really easy way for us to be able to follow up and make sure we keep track of everything that people have been asking.
All right. I'll probably be back next week, so.
Perfect.
Sounds great.
I'll see you then, man. Okay, yeah, we've been asked, can I ask another question on the online stream? Please, by all means, ask away.
What I wanted to ask is, I saw on the Nexus S when you released Ice Cream that it had Hebrew user interface, but the Galaxy Nexus didn't. So I want to ask if Hebrew is going to be part of the standard user interfaces or isn't?
It's a fair question, but I don't think anyone in this room really has any insight there.
Yeah, I don't think anyone here would know.
No, we can look into that and see if that's something which we can comment on, but I have sort of no idea what goes into the decisions on what languages are supported on each of the devices.
Because it sits on one device, but not on the other, so it's quite funny because
that surprises me a little. I would have thought if it was a platform level thing, then if it was on the Nexus S, it would have been on the
well, I know sometimes things are removed simply because of space, especially when you use fonts. It's pretty easy to support a lot of new languages when it's just new localization files, but fonts take up, well, actually even then, no, I take it back, even extra languages take up quite a bit of space. So you have two issues. One is localization files, and two is the fonts for that language. And if your device is already right on the edge of the amount of space it has, a lot of times additional language support is one of the things that does get cut. So that might be one of the reasons where there, again, none of us here are actually involved in those decisions, so we can't actually give you a definitive answer here. Just my suspicion.
Yeah, what I'd say as well, like I used to be based over in London, and I would see that there would be different language packs bundled with the devices based on which countries they were being sold in. So like the American version of the device will have English and Spanish, and the European version will have more European languages and things. So it may just be a factor where you bought the phone.
Well, I'll tell you, the Nexus S I actually bought in the United States and it has Hebrew, and the Galaxy Nexus I bought in the UK, but it doesn't, so it's quite funny.
Right. Well,
so it's actually quite the opposite.
Yeah. No. Sorry. I'll see if we can find out what the plans are there or what the story is. But yeah,
but you're saying this is the one that does not have the additional languages?
No, it does.
No, the Nexus S does have it.
Yeah, that's actually weird, because the Nexus does have less space. I'd expect that to be the one where they cut it from. So actually, that blows my theory out of the water too. Wow, I have no idea.
Yeah, we'll check it out and hopefully be able to let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right, let's see. I think we've still got some time. Let's see. Sanjeev's question we answered already. The next question is from Kirilos Mossad from New Jersey, who asks, why can't in-app billing send callbacks to my server through the URL listed in the Google Merchant integration? He would like advice on how to achieve automated callbacks to his server. This seems like it could be a fairly easy feature to enable.
So I can take this one. And the answer here is the reason why you can't is because Google Play is the the party that technically owns the transactions, and as a result of that, two things. One, it means that you actually don't have write access to a lot of the the Google Checkout API calls, and two, part of the reason why you don't have write access to a lot of those is because we actually need that callback. So we use that callback to know when, for example, if an order is canceled, we send a notification to the device. That automated callback is what tells us that the cancellation has happened. Checkout only supports one callback. We need it, therefore you can't change it. So unfortunately, there's really not much you can do here in that sense. It would certainly be a nice feature to have, but most of the cases we see it's not actually required. So if you happen to be watching live, I'd love for you to actually jump on the air with us and let us know what's actually going on, because I'm curious what you're trying to accomplish here. Most of the time you don't need it.
Yeah, it seems to me that what you want to do is achievable, but perhaps not in the way that you want, right? That we expect to handle the callbacks through Google Play app on the device, and then it's your responsibility to contact your server independently of that transaction.
Right. So there are ways you can go and actually take your order and send it to your server and verify that it's authentic. So if you take a look at the in-app billing source code, every transaction has two parts: a JSON data blob, which contains your order ID and the in-app item ID and all that important detail that you need to know as far as what the user bought, and it contains a signature. That signature is based off of the RSA key published in your Google Play developer console profile. We have a little public key block. You paste it into the source code when you set up in-app billing. We use that to go and verify that nothing's been tampered in transit on the way to the device, but it can also be used to verify that nothing has been tampered on in transit on the way to your server. So what I recommend doing is take the in-app billing code, just all of it, strip out the parts that are Android specific. Mostly what you care about is a file called security.java. There's a few others that are important there too, but basically anything that doesn't compile outside of Android, remove. And then use that code to go and verify your app data and signature. The app data is just JSON. You can read it pretty easily, and then you have a way to go and have your phone transmit orders securely to your server and take action on that. It's not a callback, but the phone does get a callback, and that phone can then go and relay data to your server. So it covers most cases there.
Perfect. Okay, let's see. Brion Nagy has asked us on the G+ page. He says, it would be nice if developers could add short comments right in the manifest as to why they're using a specific permission. I've seen an app that only required internet, but some commenter was complaining that the app was stealing contact data. He notes that it is pretty hard to steal your contacts if it doesn't have access to them. That's interesting. I've seen this suggestion come up a few times, and kind of relates back to that earlier question over having permissions which you can ask for at runtime around exactly when you want to use that specific functionality. Interestingly, this comment kind of answers its own question, because you point out that it only requires the internet permission, but people are complaining because they think it's stealing contact data even though it doesn't ask for that permission. I would say that it doesn't matter what you write in your manifest comment. If people are making that mistake, giving them more information doesn't help. And plus, it's actually a security risk by doing this, because if you think about it, permissions are there to protect you from apps doing malicious things. So someone who wants to do something malicious, chances are they're going to write something in their manifest saying, this is really not malicious. This is just so that I can do something totally harmless, which you shouldn't worry about. So the approach that we've taken is exactly the reverse. The descriptions of what each permission does is defined by the system, so that you know exactly what it does, because it says, and the internet permission is quite explicit. It says exactly what it gives permission for. Same with read contacts.
Yeah, I've never seen a malicious app that says it's malicious.
No, not a successful one.
Yeah, it'd be like the computer virus says in big letters, "I am a computer virus. You should download me so that I can infect your system and do horrible things." No, they're never going to say that.
Yeah. So we get the frustration. Like you're trying to do something that's perfectly reasonable, and you just want to explain to users why it's perfectly reasonable, and do it in a place that they are going to be able to see that and trust it. But we need to balance that with apps which want to use it for entirely the wrong reasons. And then that balance is to basically say, whatever it says here that this permission is for is what it is for. And then it's, the challenge then is from legitimate apps to be able to help explain to users why they need to be able to do those extra things. The best practice is often to use as few permissions as you possibly can. What we've seen time and time again is that users really don't like to give their apps more permissions than they really have to. And so obviously that can come down to balancing, balancing functionality versus perception, and that's certainly a challenge. But if in doubt, try and see if you can do something similar without having to require more and more and more. Particularly if the only gating factor is something like advertising, that can be tricky. But less is more when it comes to asking for permissions, I think. Mm-hmm. Let's see, we're just about out of time, 2:59. Should we squeeze one last question in? I think we'll try. This is from Ed Burnett. Hey, Ed. What's the best practice way to do a download notification that includes a progress bar without using the download manager on Android 2.33, 3.1, and 4.03? see, do we have a relatively quick answer for that? That feels like it may actually be something we can better answer with some code snippets and stuff on Stack Overflow.
Yeah, I'm curious why you don't want to use the download manager. The download manager is actually a pretty sophisticated piece of code. It does a lot of things for you that are very hard to do yourself, like handling, for example, what happens when I change networks. What happens when I'm on Wi-Fi versus when I'm on a cell network? If a file is really large, should I postpone the download until later, right? There's a lot of logic in this part of it. So my first piece of advice here is use Download Manager. If you need Download Manager on older devices, we have backported some of the functionality as part of the large file support for Market, I believe.
Oh, Android expansion files?
Yes. So Dan Galpin wrote a client library that contains some of that functionality then in a backwards compatible way. You can take a look at how he's done it. I mean, I can't really think of a really good way to go and do this without using Download Manager that I would call a best practice. Yeah. Because really, Download Manager does the right thing, and trying to do the right thing on your own is incredibly hard.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I'd say is, like, we know Ed Burnett's been an Android developer for a long way back. He wrote a book on Android in the early days, which was really good. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that he's got a good reason for this. And I'm going to cling to the fact that you're asking how to do download notifications rather than downloads themselves. So it feels like this may be something specific to, you're trying to do a download, you can't use the download manager for whatever reason, and how do you display that notification the right way without using the download manager? So my first reaction would be to have a look at how the download manager creates that notification and copy it. Because the best practice way is the way that the download manager does it. So the same sort of UI and the same sort of update stuff as what the download manager does seems like it would be the best way to mirror it if you absolutely can't use the download manager.
Right, because you do want to provide a consistent UI.
Yeah.
So and the easiest way to provide a consistent UI is just go and copy that code.
Yeah, exactly. So if we've missed the point, Ed, do maybe post the question on Stack Overflow with a little bit more detail and ping us, and we'll look into it and see if we can provide some more insight. So I think that wraps us up. We're at 3 o'clock. Once again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining in. We'll be back again next Wednesday at 2 o'clock. Again, answering questions from the moderator page, so please do continue to add things in there. The earlier you put them on there, the better chance we will have of having a really good answer for you. We'll also be trawling through Stack Overflow looking for great questions to answer. And please, again, we love taking questions from people live. So if you are watching and you want to join us in person next week, let us know and we'll add you to the circle. And one last thing as well, if you are watching on the live stream and you've stayed through right till the end, thank you very much. Please do +1 the post so that we have an idea of how many people are out there. And thank you again, and we will see you next week.
See you, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Take it easy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.